If this episode spoke to your soul, I invite you to subscribe and stay connected to this sacred space. Each week, I share transmissions to awaken your presence, align with your highest self, and remember the beauty of now. Subscribe to Journey with Me and let your listening become a living ritual. Welcome to Embody, a place to embody your true color love. I'm Pratima Prashnjit. Today I want to dive deep into a topic that all of us are often faced with in our personal and professional lives, and we may not always be equipped at that moment to deal with what we call change in relationships, family dynamics, in our personal growth journey, change in general. And whether it's maybe you're changing your career or you've experienced this sudden shift of changing your life's trajectory. You started off with something that you chase all your life, and the constant chasing that results in burnout, and you're now led on a path where uncertainties and fear and exhaustion kind of ground you to the ground. And you may be at a space, you may think that you're at a point in your life where, there's no hope now. But that's a perfect space, the perfect crossroad in your journey in life where these deep answers to the questions that you ask, where they're kind of activated, because you've at this point where you're starting to introspect, and the missing points and the missing steps that you've been avoided all your life because of chasing something that's not aligned with who you are, your passions, your purpose. And when that is no longer serving you in your personal, professional life, you start asking deeper intellectual questions. What am I doing here? What am I here to awaken? How can I be of service? What do I want to express, build, share, or offer? Who would I like to serve, and what do I want to serve them? Oftentimes we don't ask ourselves those questions. We set a target, a goal. I want to make 6 figures income a month. I want this in my partner. I want to drive this car. But beneath the objects and beneath the chasing, beneath the obsession, it's where the currency, really, the blueprint of our life that really is leading us to where we're supposed to be. And that's how we're ending up on this crossroad of questioning, what am I here to do? What transformations ripple from my work? What legacy will this energy support long after I'm gone? And you may think that you're, in a rut or you're lost. But in those moments when we are deep, when the wounds are very much opened, that's where we're open up to opportunities and flow of higher ideas. That's where we allow the greatest part of ourselves to express and show, which we often covered up. And as you try to move forward from that point, you start seeing these synchronicities, like these very questions that you started paying attention to. You see the answers showing up in your life. you suddenly have this idea of, starting a career which you had no intention of being of service, whether you were, I don't know, a marketing executive and you find yourself want to do gardening or starting a farming business or some sort, a total shift in career. Maybe because deep down within that, planting and farming and gardening is where you actually feel your most joy in being who you are and not what people expect of you, not what is trending, not what everyone's doing, not because the income is higher, but you're at this blissful space where you can be expressive in your gardening, watching flowers blossom and bloom and being in nature, being part of the natural creativity of nature. And you have this sudden shift and you start to think, if something's wrong with you, why are you being so different? So that's where archetypes, when we understand the deeper meaning of what archetypes are, we can better understand why is it we have this sudden shift in our answers, why we have the sudden shifts in our patterns of behaving and thinking and making different shifts in our life, personally and professionally. So when we start to work with our archetypes, we no longer question this new pattern that we're starting to base our life work on. We embrace this new pattern that's actually evolving and sprouting, which was deeply covered up by our constant chase in corporate culture. So when I started doing my gardening and I want to get more into farming or poultry or everything which I was never doing before, but I find this sudden urge and this sudden passion and purpose to pursue it. But when you realize that, you don't question, why am I having a sudden change in my life? I don't know what I want to do with my life. This is not what I went to university for, to learn about flowers and gardening. No. So when we understand archetype, we no longer have those questions because we understand that this is a new pattern. It's not really a new pattern, but it's part of my evolving. We're constantly changing and evolving into that higher aspects of our lives from one pattern to the next. And when you allow, and when you be in that moment, you're embracing the multifaceted dimensions of yourself. You're no longer stuck in your cubicle staring at the screen in a computer and manipulating people and selling them products that add no value to their life, which were you're doing in corporate culture before. But you're starting to find more meaning and purpose in the work that you're doing, which you've never imagined of doing. But there is so much joy, and that joy is sparked. It was always there. It was just naturally sparked and feel a lot more alive because you aligned your purpose with your gardening and your farming. It's really what your heart was longing for, to be of creativity, to be with nature. And you, without even realizing it, you would have embodied that creative, abundant part of yourself. So in ancient wisdom, you have these archetypes. Archetypes they're sort of avatars of consciousness, or the patterns of energy that consciousness embodies, and we become the embodiment of that archetype, and we move through life and create whatever it is in front of us through those energy patterns. And this explains why Many times you find someone have a sudden shift in their creative work. They may move from a carpenter, I don't know, to a singer, from a singer to a chef, from a chef to a dancer. You have these different modalities, and there is no shame in changing and switching, because we, as part of this greater consciousness, this collective consciousness, we are made up of multidimensional personalities, and this is ancient wisdom that has been taught for millennia. And as we're becoming aware of it, we no longer question, this identity shift from that identity shift. We learn to embody and embrace all dimensions of ourselves. And when we start to do that, embodying, our creativity aspect, when we embody our warrior-like aspect, when we embody that strength and romantic aspect of our life, there is this sense of wholeness and, feeling expressive and feeling the freedom to be when you feel like being, and not kind of restricting that desire that's actually birthing through you. When we restrict that desire, that pattern, that archetype that actually wants to be birthed through your work, through your life, that's when we have burnouts. That's when we have anxiety. That's when we have fear and depression in our lives. So when you start to link this ancient wisdom of archetypes and with modern science, it all connects. Because when you met with change in your life, as we were talking before, you're at this junction in your path where you have this, everything in your life is going wrong, and you reach this point where you realize you were in the wrong career your entire life. You start to have more self-compassion, because you realize it was okay, to be in that career. You served it for the moment, but there is this innate calling that wants to be adapted into a different pattern in your life. You want to govern life based on a different pattern, move forward with a different approach, and you no longer need to self-blame and self-sabotage yourself. You realize that you're a multifaceted being who is free to express in so many layers, in so many forms. And that moment you've realized that you have all the archetypes in your fingers. And this really tells us, we can be anything what we want when we give it our awareness, when we understand how to embody all the different layers of our being, creativity and warrior-like, or the spiritual self, or the I don't know, political self. It is okay to be what you want, who you want, based on the pattern that's evolving through you at the moment. And when we're at this point where we're going through change, it's very beneficial to be aware of these patterns and knowing that it's okay. It's time for you to evolve. You're giving your brain that certainty that, hey, we're okay. There's no need to be fear, or we're just starting a new pattern. And the brain, it loves patterns. It loves to feel safe. It loves to know that this is safe for me to move forward. And it doesn't treat anything as a threat, because you would have aligned yourself with it and accepting that pattern of who you're becoming at that point in your life. And this, takes us back to my favorite part of this all. And when you go to like ancient places and you have all of these goddess symbols, like, and figurines with the ancient goddesses like Durga and Kali and Zeus and all of them. And these are the stories that, our ancient teachers left us. This is nothing new. I did not just discover this in a textbook, but has been taught to us for millennia, passed on to us generations to generations. And we see these patterns appear in whether you're Zeus, whether you're Athena, whether you're Lakshmi or Saraswati, whether if you're the Egyptian goddesses, different modalities with same wisdom, different form with same patterns, patterns repeating. And, as the stories pass on to us, we tend to, I talked about this before, we misinterpret the information and we start to treat these archetypes, as something different from us. We see them as gods and deities and we start to worship them, but not knowing that, these archetypes, they're mirrors of who we are, who we're becoming, who we will become at a different point and phase in our life, in line to the situation that needs to be governed by that specific archetype. So when you go to a temple and you see all of these goddesses lined up on the beautiful altars, they're nothing separate from you. They are you. But archetypes, they were told in stories. These archetypes are energies, whether it's clarity, whether it's abundance, whether it's love and compassion and strength. For these information to pass on from millennia to millennia, it has to be told in symbols and metaphors, in symbols, so that we can have, an instant remembrance of what they represent. So imagine if you have to read about everything all over again about, these archetypes. You wouldn't have been bothered to actually want to know. But when we see them in stories and symbols, we have this instant reconnection with them. And better yet, our subconscious minds is very much influenced by myth and symbols and stories. So what this does, when we work with our archetype self, it bypasses the logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is very much logical thinking, the masculine, like aggressive way of thinking. It bypasses that part of your brain and it goes straight to your limbic system, which is your primal, ancient, emotional way of being. This is why we dream in symbols. This is why stories of the goddesses and the gods resonate so much with us, because it's very ancient. The brain remembers these patterns. It loves patterns. Patterns help it to keep safe. It loves to know that, it's in charge of everything. So whenever you're at the junction in your life and you feel you're going through this change and you may feel lost and uncertain, that's the perfect place for you to reconnect with your archetypes. When you start to ask yourself questions, Deepak Chopra said, I've said this before, these very questions become the intentions, and within the intention is the fundamentals or the mechanics of fulfilling itself. And it fulfills itself by taking the shape of that archetype. So if you're going through change in your life, change in career, change in relationship, whether it's wealth, whether it's starting a family, whether it's moving to a foreign country and there is this uncertainty, that's perfect for you, because uncertainty can feel a lot empty. But emptiness is the birth of new patterns, of newness and wholeness. And that's when you reconnect with your deepest self. And that's a perfect place for you to ask new questions. What am I here to awaken? What do I want to express, build, share, or offer? How can I be of service? And the answers show up. They show up in synchronicities. They show up in signs. They show up in symbols. And when you learn to be aware of these signs and symbols, they multiply, because where your attention goes, things grow. That's neuroplasticity. Awareness, neuroplasticity, same thing, different language. The ancients say awareness, and science call it neuroplasticity. It's the same thing. For me personally, I grew up in Vedic wisdom. So I like to work with the goddesses like Saraswati and Lakshmi and Durga. And I've shared this story before. When I started this podcast, I was at this point in my life with a total career switch. A lot of changes happened in my life, and there was this deep emptiness, but not the definition of emptiness that how we would describe it, but emptiness is the fertile ground for newness in your life. And it is from that phase in my life where I started seeing, I asked for a sign. Show me a sign of a swan that, starting this podcast, is aligned with my deeper purpose. And the swan is a symbol of the goddess, the archetype Saraswati. She's the goddess of voice and communicating and teaching and knowledge. And I asked for a sign, and I see the synchronicities. I went to visit my aunt barbecue by the water. She has a beach, beautiful place in the backyard, and I saw a pair of swans, white and beautiful. I fed them bread on the land. It was the most beautiful thing ever. And I am here with you recording the 20-something episode of this podcast. And I'm sharing this with you because I've seen it. I worked with it with Archetypes, and it has impacted my life in so many ways. And I can't wait to teach you more of what I'm learning and more of what have I applied and all of the results that I'm having right now. Thank you for tuning in. If this episode, shift a truth in you, trust it. And remember, every moment of every day is, a chance, an opportunity of you becoming your highest self. Until next time, embody your true color, love. If this space has nourished you, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a review or share this episode with someone who's ready to receive. Your presence here is part of the blessing. Thank you for walking this path with me.